We put together a pretty solid list of 10 of the best horror movies of 1987. Some of these great films are heavily praised, and some of these great films aren't praised enough. Anyhow, we're covering all gems that were and still are very effective in horror cinema history. Number 10. The Stepfather. The Stepfather is a psychological horror flick from 1987, directed by Joseph Rubin and featuring actors like Terry O'Quinn, Jill Sholin, and Shelley Hack. O'Quinn plays a serial killer who takes on a new identity after marrying a widow with a teenage daughter. After having murdered his previous family, he can't shake his violent tendencies, especially when his stepdaughter starts to get suspicious. The movie is loosely inspired by the real-life mass murderer John List, but it definitely has that slasher vibe typical of the time. The screenplay was penned by Donald E. Westlake, based on a story he co-wrote with Carolyn Lefcourt and Brian Garfield, who is known for Death Wish, with some additional tweaks by David Loughery that went uncredited.
What'd you say? Thank you, honey.
The Stepfather started out being promoted as a psychological thriller. However, when it didn't get the reaction New Century hoped for, they switched gears and marketed it as a slasher flick instead. The movie hit theaters in the US on January 23, 1987. In its opening weekend, it made $260,587 across 105 theaters. By the end of its run, in 148 theaters, it raked in a total of $2.5 million in the US box office. Terry O'Quinn received nominations for a Saturn Award and an Independent Spirit Award. He also snagged third place in the 1987 voting for the National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Actor. Director Rubin took home the Critics Award at the 1988 Cognac Festival. Scott Tobias refers to the film as a cult classic, viewing it as a critique of Reaganism. Number 9. The Hidden. The Hidden is a sci-fi flick from 1987, directed by Jack Shoulder and penned by Jim Kuth, who went by Bob Hunt for this one. It hit theaters thanks to New Line Cinema and features a cast that includes Kyle MacLachlan and Michael Nouri, along with Clu Gulager, Chris Mulkey, Edo Ross, Clarence Felder, Claudia Christian, and Larry Cedar. The movie got a pretty good reception overall. There was even a sequel, The Hidden 2, which came out in 1993 and was directed by Seth Pinsker. The movie hit theaters in the US thanks to New Line Cinema in October 1987. It ended up being a decent success for them, raking in a little over $9.7 million at the box office. Variety mentioned that The Hidden is a solid thriller, skillfully directed by Jack Shoulder, but it falls flat with a pretty standard sci-fi ending. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times gave it 3 out of 4 stars, calling it a surprisingly effective film. Vincent Canby of the New York Times pointed out that while the movie mainly features car chases around Los Angeles, it also has its moments of humor. Kevin Thomas from the Los Angeles Times described it as unstintingly violent as it is crudely ingenious. Hal Hinson of the Washington Post stated that The Hidden is one of the most enjoyable genre films to come out in a while. In a 1992 look back, James M. Silver from the Los Angeles Times noted that the film didn't get enough time in theaters to find its audience, but still called it outstanding. Over time, it has gained a cult following. Number 8. The Believers. The Believers is a 1987 thriller that mixes neo-noir and horror, directed by John Schlesinger and featuring Martin Sheen, Robert Loggia, and Helen Shaver. It draws inspiration from Nicolas Condé's 1982 novel, The Religion. Interestingly, the film is said to have had an impact on the cult, led by Adolfo Constanzo and backed by Sara Aldrete in Matamoros, Mexico, which was rooted in Palo Mayombe, an Afro-Cuban faith akin to Santeria. The Believers was released in theaters on June 10, 1987. It performed $18.7 million at the box office, off of a $13 million budget. Hal Hinson of the Washington Post had a generally favorable take on the film, stating that The Believers is a bizarre occult thriller about the implications of religious faith. And though it doesn't expand upon its shock tactics as much as it would like to or make its theological points, the movie's dread atmosphere begins to seep into your head. Brett Gallman over at Oh the Horror gave the film a thumbs up, saying, "While The Believers feels familiar on a surface level, its use of Santeria mythology and Schlesinger's deft blend of suspense and graphic shocks provide enough flavor to separate it from the flock." Number 7. Near Dark. Near Dark is a 1987 American neo-Western horror flick that was co-written and directed by Kathryn Bigelow, marking her first time in the director's chair. It features a cast including Adrian Pasdar, Jenny Wright, Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, and Jeanette Goldstein. The story revolves around a young guy in a small town in Oklahoma who gets tangled up with a family of wandering American vampires. Even though it didn't do well at the box office, critics had mostly good things to say about it. Over time, the film has built up a loyal fan base. Near Dark hit theaters on October 2nd, 1987, starting off in 262 locations and raking in $635,789 during its opening weekend. By the second week, it expanded to 429 screens. Ultimately, the film earned $3.4 million, which fell short of its $5 million budget. Bigelow has pointed out that the film struggled at the box office partly because it came out so soon after The Lost Boys, which debuted 2 months earlier on a much larger scale, with 1,542 screens. She noted that The Lost Boys was a big-budget vampire flick from Warner Brothers that had a lot of promotional power behind it, while Near Dark felt more like a quiet little whisper in comparison. Richard Corliss from Time magazine described Near Dark as weird and beautiful, dubbing it the ultimate teenage vampire love story. Richard Schickel, also from Time, thought the film was a smart twist on the vampire genre. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone agreed, labeling it gory and gorgeous. Alan Jones from Radio Times gave it 4 out of 5 stars, calling it a horror classic of the 80s and one of the greatest vampire films ever. He praised it as a visually stunning and terrifying experience and pointed out the memorable performances by Henriksen and Paxton. Number 6. Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2, also known in some ads as Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn, is a 1987 American comedy horror flick directed by Sam Raimi, who teamed up with Scott Spiegel to write it. This film is the second in the Evil Dead series and acts as both a remake and a sequel, or requel, to The Evil Dead from 1981. Bruce Campbell stars as Ash Williams, who heads to a secluded cabin in the woods with his girlfriend. While there, he stumbles upon an audio tape that reads from an ancient book, and when he hits play, it releases a bunch of demons that start to possess and mess with him. Evil Dead 2 hit theaters on March 13, 1987, but it didn't make much of a splash initially, raking in just $807,000 during its opening weekend from a limited release in 310 theaters. Still, after a little over a month, it managed to pull in a total of $5,924 globally. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times rated the movie 3 out of 4 stars, calling it a pretty clever satire that gets you in the mood to dance. He highlighted the film's surreal vibe, perfect comedic timing, and its gritty, low-budget feel. Ebert mentioned that if you're aware it's all about the special effects and you've watched plenty of other films with a good sense of humor, you could really enjoy Evil Dead 2. Number 5. Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness is a supernatural horror flick from 1987, crafted by John Carpenter, who wrote, co-scored, and directed it. The film features actors like Donald Pleasance, Victor Wong, Jameson Parker, and Lisa Blount. It's the second part of Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, kicking off with The Thing, 1982, and wrapping up with In the Mouth of Madness, 1994. The story revolves around a group of quantum physics students in Los Angeles who team up with a Catholic priest to investigate a mysterious ancient cylinder filled with liquid found in a monastery, which turns out to be a living, liquid version of Satan's son. Prince of Darkness opened October 23, 1987 on a $3 million budget. The film finished at the box office grossing $14.2 million. Nigel Floyd from Time Out gave a thumbs up to the film, describing Prince of Darkness as captivating, and noting that the tight, tense atmosphere created by the dynamic camera work and bold angles builds up to an exhilarating finale. In 2004, Jim Emerson pointed out that Prince of Darkness is a hidden gem in the horror genre. What gives me chills about Prince of Darkness is its quirky yet clever main idea and its genuinely surreal visuals, some of which could have come straight from Buñuel and Dali's Un Chien Andalou. Like many of Carpenter's works, Prince of Darkness eventually gained a dedicated fan base. Number 4. The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys is a 1987 American film that mixes supernatural elements with black comedy and horror. Directed by Joel Schumacher and produced by Harvey Bernhard, the screenplay was crafted by Jeffrey Boehm, Janice Fisher, and James Jeremias, based on a story by Fisher and Jeremias. The movie features a star-studded cast, including Corey Feldman, Jamie Gertz, Corey Haim, Edward Herrmann, Barnard Hughes, Jason Patrick, Kiefer Sutherland, and Diane Weist. The movie centers around two teenage brothers who relocate with their divorced mom to the made-up town of Santa Carla, California, only to find out that it's a hotspot for vampires. The title nods to the Lost Boys from J.M. Barrie's tales about Peter Pan and Neverland, who, much like vampires, never age. Most of the filming took place in Santa Cruz, California. The Lost Boys hit theaters thanks to Warner Brothers Pictures on July 31, 1987, and it turned out to be both a critical and commercial hit, raking in over $32 million on a budget of $8.5 million. It's now considered a cult classic. The Lost Boys is often seen as a game changer for how vampires are portrayed in pop culture, adding a fresh, youthful, and sexier vibe to the vampire scene. It even paved the way for later films like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Number 3. Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a supernatural horror flick from 1987, marking Clive Barker's first time in the director's chair. It's based on his 1986 novella, The Hellbound Heart. The story revolves around a mysterious puzzle box that calls forth the Cenobites, a group of otherworldly beings who blur the lines between pain and pleasure. The film features performances from Andrew Robinson, Claire Higgins, Ashley Lawrence, and Doug Bradley, who plays the iconic leader of the Cenobites, known as Pinhead in later films. The film was released in the United States and Canada on September 18, 1987. Hellraiser grossed $14.5 million in both territories after a $4.4 million opening weekend. The Washington Post described the film as dark, often unsettling, and at times genuinely scary, but pointed out that Barker's vision hasn't fully transitioned from page to screen. There are some flaws, especially in the close-up shots and the standard score, yet there are moments of truly creative gore. Unfortunately, the film loses its grip at the climax, leading to a surprisingly weak ending filled with special effects and a victorious good.
The box. You opened it. We came.
Roger Ebert was less than impressed, giving it half a star out of 4, calling it one of the dreariest horror films to come along in ages. It's one of those flicks where you sit there, feeling more anxious as the runtime stretches on, fearing it might actually be feature-length. He added that this film lacks any wit, style, or logic, and the real horror is that actors had to perform in it, and technicians had to bring its lack of imagination to life. Variety noted that Hellraiser is well-crafted, well-acted, and the visual effects are mostly executed with skill. Number 2. Angel Heart. Angel Heart is a 1987 American film that blends neo-noir and psychological horror, based on William Hjortsberg's 1978 novel, Falling Angel. Alan Parker took the reins as both writer and director, featuring a cast that includes Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, Lisa Bonet, and Charlotte Rampling. The story follows Harry Angel, played by Rourke, a private investigator in New York City who is tasked with finding a missing guy named Johnny Favorite. His search leads him to New Orleans, where he gets caught up in a string of violent murders. In North America, Angel Heart hit theaters on March 6, 1987, thanks to TriStar Pictures. It kicked off its run at number 4 in the weekend box office, raking in nearly $3.7 million from 815 screens. Overall, the film made $17.2 million domestically, but it had a production budget of $18 million. William Yortzberg, the guy behind Falling Angel, shared his thoughts on the movie adaptation, saying, "Alan Parker crafted a fantastic script and turned it into a film that really sticks with you. Casting Robert De Niro as Cypher was a genius move." Vincent Canby from the New York Times gave a nod to the cinematography and production design, but wasn't too impressed with Rourke's performance, calling it suitably intense but ultimately ineffective. Meanwhile, Rita Kempley from the Washington Post described Angel Heart as over-stylized, leaving us overwhelmed when the soundtrack goes wild, shifting from a few thumping beats to a heart-pounding score. Pauline Kael of The New Yorker took issue with Parker's direction, stating, "You can't really separate the occult from the confusing. Parker just doesn't have the knack for making evil alluring, and his editing feels haphazard." She also had some harsh words for De Niro's cameo, saying, "It's the kind of appearance that big-name actors love, just popping in to overshadow the local talent." On the show Siskel and Ebert and the Movies, Roger Ebert gave the film a thumbs up, praising it. Meanwhile, Siskel, in his Chicago Tribune review, took issue with the film's controversial sex scene, saying it wasn't as shocking as the rating board suggested. Ebert, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, rated the film 3.5 stars out of 4, describing Angel Heart as a mix of thriller and horror, but mostly a stylish ride where Parker and his cast really enjoy pushing boundaries. Ian Nathan from Empire called it a diabolical treat with Rourke and De Niro at their best. Almar Haflidason from the BBC noted that the film keeps you intrigued throughout, praising Rourke as captivating, while also highlighting the strong performances from De Niro, Charlotte Rampling, and the rest of the cast. Richard Luck from Film 4 wrapped up his review by saying the book is so good, it deserves a better adaptation, but Rourke's performance makes Angel Heart stand out among other films in the genre. Number 1. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors is a 1987 supernatural slasher flick directed by Chuck Russell, marking his first time in the director's chair. The plot was crafted by Wes Craven and Bruce Wagner, making it the third movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. It features a cast including Heather Langenkamp, Patricia Arquette, Lawrence Fishburne, Priscilla Pointer, Craig Wasson, and Robert Englund as the iconic Freddy Krueger. In this installment, Nancy Thompson has become a psychiatrist, and she teams up with Kristen, a patient who has the ability to pull others into her dreams. Together with a group of kids, they embark on a bold mission in the dream world to rescue a child from Freddy's clutches. After the disappointing reception of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, New Line Cinema was left wondering if they should keep the franchise going. Wes Craven, who created the original film, didn't have a hand in the second one because he never wanted the story to turn into a series. But after seeing how poorly Freddy's Revenge was received, he agreed to help write the script for the third movie, hoping it would wrap things up. Surprisingly, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors ended up being a hit, leading to more sequels. Unfortunately, Craven couldn't direct it since he was busy working on Deadly Friend at the same time. Dream Warriors hit theaters in the US thanks to New Line Cinema in February 27, 1987. It was their first nationwide release, launching in 1,343 theaters and snagging the top spot with a weekend haul of $8.9 million. which was a record for indie films back then. The movie raked in $45 million at the domestic box office, making it the studio's biggest hit of the year and the 24th highest-grossing film of 1987.